Number 1. The Yard. When I was a teenager, I'm an only child, I often didn't have a lot to do during the summer. We lived way out in the country. I can still see the house in my mind, though it has been decades since I have lived there. It was on a hill in a really, well, I guess hilly area. I'm not sure how else to describe it. Both of my parents worked in town. The town was like an hour and 15 minutes drive from our home. During summer break, they would be gone long before I woke up, and would not get back home until pretty late. So I spent a lot of time by myself during that time. All the roads in the area were those gravel roads. From my house, it was about a half-hour walk before you got to the paved road. The other direction, however, took you further into the hills. I hadn't really explored that very much, however. One day I was supremely bored. We had a swimming pool in the backyard, but I was tired of swimming every day. We didn't have internet way back then, and we didn't have cable on the television. So that far out, you might be lucky to get 5 channels on the television, and they were almost always fuzzy. I had video games, but after a while, there's only so much video games that you can play before you want to do something else. So around noon on this day, I decided I would follow the gravel road in the direction that I had never been before. I was curious as to what I might come across. It was weird walking alongside the road like that, up and down hills. The forest was bulging on both sides of the road, but I didn't see any animals. I felt like I was really all alone in the world. It was nice, but so strange. Every time I heard a noise, I would jump, just a little, expecting to see something. I eventually came to a fork in the road. I hadn't come across any houses or driveways at that point, but I decided I would take the right fork in the road. Much like the poem by Robert Frost, that made all the difference. I kept walking, and the vegetation was even thicker going in this direction. Many of the trees reached over the road as if they were reaching for each other, and it was getting darker and darker thanks to the thickness of the trees and brush. This was even though it was probably around 1 p.m. in the afternoon. Eventually I came to realize that this road was actually a driveway of some sorts. It led straight to a house, and the absolute strangest house that I'd ever seen in my life. I mean, the house was just a really old house, but it had a huge front yard, and the yard was overgrown with grass and weeds. But that was not the strangest thing. There was carnival equipment all over the yard. It was almost like a theme park in the front yard. There were also a few old and rusted carnival rides sitting in the overgrown yard too. If you have ever seen really old, retired carnival rides, you would know how utterly creepy this place was. The best way that I could describe it was that it was like a graveyard for a carnival. The fact that the trees were so tall and everything was so dark didn't change things. I don't know why, but as I was looking around at the equipment, I glanced over at the house. I saw someone for a split second looking at me from behind a curtain. It was very strange, a very strange looking person who nearly looked like they were dead. But quickly they closed the curtain and moved back into the house. The whole thing was creepy, but even weirder because I had assumed that the house was abandoned. But not only was it the creepiest house and yard I had ever seen, there was at least one person living there. I was curious, but I was too creeped out to remain there. What decided it for me, though, was hearing the sound of glass breaking near the house. It just freaked me out, and I ran out of that yard and kept running down the road. I don't know what I was running from, but I knew I was running from something. The walk home was scary as hell. Even when I got to a much lighter area, I couldn't get the image of what I had seen out of my mind. I didn't end up telling my parents about it, though, because they would have gotten angry that I'd been on someone else's property without their permission. I never went back, but to this day, I can see that creepy yard and that creepy person looking at me. Number 2. Deliverance. I was very used to living the majority of my life in more urban or suburban areas. The first time I lived in a rural area was something a bit different. I didn't have any place left to go after a bunch of bad choices, so I began talking to an old friend from high school who had moved out of state. He lived out in a cabin for a few years, although it wasn't really a cabin out in the woods. It was in a community of cabins, but it was still a lot more rural than I'd ever experienced before. The cabins weren't extremely close to each other, though. I discovered that when I moved out there. Plus, they were at least half an hour drive from the nearest convenience store. I didn't have a car at the time, and obviously didn't have a job right away when I first went out there, so I had to rely on my friend for everything, and when he was out at work, I was in the cabin by myself for long periods of time. Of course, it was a huge adjustment for me, trying to get used to living in such a different atmosphere. Plus, I couldn't just walk down to the store or order something to eat on delivery. However, after a period of time, I did discover that there was a pizza restaurant that, although it was practically a 40-minute drive from the cabin, would still deliver to it. As I recall, I mentioned that the convenience store was a half hour away at the beginning of the story. My buddy that I lived with worked at that convenience store, and he worked a late night shift, so I was nearly always home by myself at nighttime. Although we had direct TV and internet, I found the days getting very monotonous. For lack of a better word, I think I'd begun getting cabin fever. Even though I wasn't really hungry that night, I wanted to do something different than usual, so I ordered a pizza online, and pretty close to the closing time of the pizza place. I was lucky that they would make it and have their delivery driver deliver it to me on their way home from work, so the only thing I had to do was wait for it to arrive, which could take a while since they were so far away. Of the many things that I didn't quite understand about living in a rural area for the first time in my life, I didn't get why everyone seemed to go to bed so early in the evening. Everything in the area was dark pretty early into the nighttime. I was waiting for my pizza to arrive for quite a long time. Finally, I was relieved when I noticed a light outside. Taking a look out the window, I noticed a set of headlights pulling into the driveway of the cabin. I was waiting for the driver to get out of the car and come bring me the pizza, but for some reason, that didn't happen. The car just was in the driveway. It sat there, almost as if it were watching the house. I kept waiting and waiting, but no one was getting out of the car. I thought I would get out and go up to the car. It was just too weird, but maybe that's what they expected to happen. I opened the door to go outside. I had barely gotten the door open, though, when I noticed a gun being held outside the driver's window. I was able to duck back into the cabin before the gunshot went off, however. It did hit the door. The guy in the car got out. I was looking out the window, and at first, he began walking toward the house. Then, something happened. We both noticed the lights of another car coming from the road. I heard the guy curse a few times. He ran back to the car, got in, and drove off before the other car got too close. The car that came after was the actual pizza delivery driver. He pulled into the driveway and came to deliver the pizza. I told him what happened and asked if he had a cell phone to call the police. He did so, and offered to stick around until the police got there. Well, it turns out that my friend had been feuding with a few boys that he had bought drugs from. He owed them money, according to them, and he refused to pay. So one of them came that day to collect in a different way. I just got caught up in it. There wasn't a lot I could do, really. I still needed a place to stay, but my friend had a shotgun, which he kept loaded, and for me to use if the guys ever came back. I really didn't want to do that, and they may have come back, but thankfully for me, not while I was there. Number 3. Help. I was driving home late one night from work. I worked a second shift at a factory that was maybe an hour's drive away from my home. This is rural West Virginia, so sometimes you're forced to travel quite a ways if you want to have a really good job. I didn't mind the long drive so much, really, except on those nights when I was extremely tired for the drive home. On this night, I wasn't that particularly worn out, but the drive was still pretty long. It was mostly all through the hills on my way, so I had to pay close attention to where I was going. By having driven so many times before, it wasn't unusual for me to get a bit lazy in paying attention, and I had more than once gotten into a close call that could have turned into a nasty accident. On this night, it was the headlights of another car that brought me out of this semi-trance that I was in while I was driving. It wasn't that seeing another car was really that unusual, but this was obviously setting on the side of the road, since the lights were not moving any closer to me. There wasn't a lot of room on the side of the road either, as many of the roads in the area were barely big enough for two cars to drive past each other normally. Driving around the corner, if another car behind this car wasn't careful, it was extremely likely that they would plow into the car, and that resulting accident would have been pretty nasty. I decided to stop and see if whoever's car it was needed any help. It turned out to be a young lady who did have the hood of her car up. She sort of hailed me down to get me to pull over the car for her. Now, I would have helped anyone who needed the help, but I have to admit to feeling a lot safer with it being a woman. There was a lot less worry about being in danger stopping for somebody in the middle of the night. Well, I pulled my truck to the side of the road so that it was facing her car directly. That way I could see much better under the hood of her car while I tried to see what was wrong with the car. She walked up to the hood of my truck and leaned up against it when I was getting out of the truck. I was asking her what had gone wrong with the car, and she was answering me, trying to explain it, but her answers were not making any sense. I just chalked it up at the time as her not understanding much about cars, but also, while looking under the hood of the car, I wasn't able to find anything immediately wrong with the car, especially not that would explain what she was telling me. I guess I should have expected something when I heard her walk up behind me, but I was taking her for her word, despite not being able to find anything wrong. I felt a really sharp pain in my side, and it was so awful that it caused me to stumble and fall. To anyone who has never been stabbed before, it's not like what you see in a movie. You don't get stabbed once, then have some miraculous surge of strength that causes you to fight back. She stabbed me in just the right spot that caused me to fall over and not really have the ability to fight back. That was when she was then able to get into my pocket and take my wallet out before going back to my truck and looking through it. I tried to get up several times, but the pain was too severe and the muscles in my side were not cooperating. Eventually she closed the hood of her car, got into it, turned on the road, and then drove away. She left me lying on the road, barely able to move or do anything. That made everything even scarier, as I was expecting some car to come running around the side of the road and then accidentally hit me. So all I could do to get through the agonizing pain was do my best to crawl over to the truck and get into it. And yes, I was able to do it. It took quite a while, and was easily the most agonizing experience of my life, but I was eventually able to do it and slumped down in the truck. However, the pain was so terrible that I felt myself beginning to pass out. At the time, I began to think that maybe I was dying, and what a horrible and pointless way to die. I woke up in the hospital. Someone had seen the truck sitting on the side of the road and stopped to see what had happened. They called an ambulance and got me into the hospital. It took a while, but the woman who stabbed me and robbed me was eventually arrested. It didn't help me out too much because I was still pretty terrified the entire time that I was ever driving to and from work from then on. Hey y'all, Killer Orange Cat here. First, as usual, I want to thank all my paid Patreon subscribers, starting with my 2 VIPs, Pixie Hopper 8 and Chiamerah Cat. I'd also like to thank Kelli Clark, Broken Angel, Stinking Ooze, EricaOdd, Heidi H, Chronic J. Thank you all for your continued support. Now, I think we all know what the elephant in the room is. It's been about a month since I posted a video. As we all know, about a month ago, my channel got hacked. It took about a week to get everything back. And after that, we had some problems with security. I also got very, very, very sick for about 2 weeks. I don't know what it was, but it was one of the worst things I've ever had in my entire life. And I could barely get up and take a shower. By the time I was done showering, I had to come back in my room and collapse in my bed. That's how weak this cold or whatever virus it might have been, I don't know. But it was just hell for about 2 weeks. So then, when I was hoping that all the pieces of the puzzle would be picked back up, 2 weeks after we got the channel back, it got hacked again. Now, supposedly there were some security things that my sister found out and was able to get the channel back again and keep this from happening again in the future. And then after that, it's just been a little bit of time for me to kind of like build my confidence back up, because it's been a really, really difficult month. But I want to assure everybody that this is not an end. In fact, let's look at it as a new beginning. In fact, I hope you all like the new banner. It's by Gwendolyn, who is a member of my Discord. It is a beautiful picture, and I think it encompasses the channel and the new beginning pretty well. Now, I really liked the old banner as well, and I'm sorry for anybody who liked it too, but I don't have a file of it that I can find, of the gothic cat. But this new banner looks really good, and I hope you like it. Everything now is tied up to my phone, so if someone tries to sign into my account somewhere, it'll come up on my phone to approve it or not. Now, I'd actually had this set up before, and for some reason it failed, but hopefully that won't happen again. So far, it has worked pretty good since we got everything back. So, thanks everybody for supporting me. I'm sure we're going to have a few rough months maybe, since I haven't had new content in a month and I've lost some subscribers because of the spam that the person who hacked my channel was pouring out. But hey, we just build and try to get back to where we were, and that's what we're going to do. So thank you for everybody, and if you like the video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please hit the subscribe button and the bell so you'll be notified of new videos. Leave me a comment, which I'll do my best to get back to, and share the video with someone you think might enjoy it. If you have an original story you want narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please send it to the address included in the description. And now I'd like to mention all of my free Patreon members. Starting with Sherry Hubbard, Baby and Baby, Vina Waldren, John Tull, RhettSchall, Hillbilly 13, Krystal Robin, Lori Hicks, Lisa Herman, Anthony Bowers, Remi, Venikins, Rose Metro, Woofer McWooferson, Cindy Cleveland, Vanapira Rayne, William H., Alien Unicorn 13, Kathryn Lynch, The Bama Guy 334, Michael Vasquez, Bonnie Lind, Collet Bond, Krista Pike, Prince UVA, HF Creations, Bonnie Gibbs, Linda Moore, DJ Lira, and of course Evil Black Cat. And let's thank Evil Black Cat for getting my channel back twice for me already. And I haven't said this in about a month, but please make sure check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.